everyone. Welcome to the Pilates Bridge Featured Expert Series. Today, we're going to be talking about Pilates lesson planning. And we have a special guest, Alana Wilbur. She's the creator of the original Pilates Journal and lesson planner. She's a wonderful Pilates instructor located in California. So we're going to be talking all things about Pilates, lesson planning, and even a little bit about what it takes to launch this Dream Pilates product online. So welcome, Alana. Just take a few minutes to introduce yourself, share a little bit of your Pilates story, and what are you doing today?
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Alana Wilbur. I'm in San Diego. And I guess just a little bit of my backstory. I have always been somebody who loves fitness, and I've been an avid fitness person since I can remember. My dad, as long as I can remember, has gone to the gym and used to tell me his stories about going to the gym. And I just wanted to be like him, I suppose. So I started going with him. And that was what I asked for when I was 13, was a gym membership. And my dad always carried his notepad with him at the gym. So he was very much a meathead in that sense. And he had a journal for years going back to all of his training logs. So he would write down what he did at the gym. He would write down his sets, his weight. I always knew what he was bench pressing. I always knew how much he was doing because he would log it down. And I kind of started that way. So then fast forward, when I was about 22, I decided that I wanted to do fitness contests. And I got my first real personal trainer, and she would give me my workout plans and I would write everything down. I had my little notebook that I would take with me, and just kind of like my dad, I would take it around with me throughout the gym, and I would write down the exercise I did, my sets, my reps, and I didn't really think twice about it. It just kind of was what I did. And then when I decided to pursue Pilates, that was back in around 2012. And going through my teacher training program, I was very meticulous because I'm a visual learner. So as I was learning things, I would write down what my instructor was saying, and I would just, get out my highlighters, color coordinate based off of like body parts, maybe arm exercises or something were in a yellow highlighter, and then hip exercises were in a purple highlighter. I got very into it. So I had my training manuals, and then I would write out all of my lesson plans for my self-practice. And I don't know, it just kind of started that way. I would write everything down. Nobody told me I had to do it, but I just would. It's very much like, when you meet somebody, you write their name down and hopefully you remember it. That was how I was with Pilates. And I have years and years and years and years of spiral notebooks from all of my old lesson plans. When I first started teaching, I very much taught group classes, and to keep record of stuff, I would just write everything down. And if I liked it, I would put like a star at the top of it and refer back to that lesson plan. But that's how it started. I was somebody who wrote all of my classes down, and I would just look back on this library of classes, let's say. And it's something that's fun for me to just look back and see how my teaching has evolved, how my idea of Pilates has evolved from when I first started to where I am now. So
Awesome.
That's how it started.
Perfect. Yeah, I know I personally love journaling, like whatever I don't write down, like even though we have all this kind of techie tools and everything else, like unless I actually put my hand to it and see it just doesn't stick, even though I work in technology. It just, there's something about that, the personal touch and writing down, journaling in any form or note taking, I think is very important.
More. It's a different action from taking pen to paper for me than typing something out.
Yeah, I know, it's like a little sidetrack, but I know, I have kids, and it's actually right now in schools, a lot of times they don't teach cursive, and actually them not learning to write cursive, I wouldn't say like it negatively impacts, but it kind of changes how their brain works because it doesn't allow them to remember as much and do that. So just even the fact of writing, it's an excellent exercise for us as teachers, and
Yes,
just to kind of write it down, take some new neurons fire up in the brain and a lot of
exactly.
memory. Yeah. Anyway, so let's kind of talk a little bit more about the lesson planning. I know, so you mentioned that you like to see that. So when you write down those lesson plans, do you a lot of times reuse them with your clients, or you reuse your personal ones? Or do you just every time there's a new group, new client, everything, you just do it
Yep.
all over?
That's a great question. So, really, before I ever started teaching private lessons, I taught a ton of group classes. And that's just the nature, especially being here in San Diego. I can't speak for other parts of the country, but San Diego is very much geared for group fitness. So, I taught a lot of classes. And because of that, I was very aware of the people that were in my classes all the time. And this is where I can look back and be like, okay, I'm evolved as an instructor, because I first thought, and this is, just me, I first thought, wow, okay, these people are coming back to my classes all the time. I need to constantly teach new things, which I have changed my view on that now that I'm very much a classical instructor, whereas before I was contemporary. So I felt like I had to keep coming up with new things to teach, new sequences. And in reality, I think my views on that are no, you don't. You don't have to constantly teach new things. You just have to make people get better at those things that you're continuously teaching. But to answer your question, I would write everything down because I wanted to feel like the class was fresh, even if just my warm up was a little different, just giving somebody a different experience. And it could be the exact same exercise, but done maybe with a different breathing pattern, or it could be the same exercises just done on a different piece of apparatus, or maybe it's on the mat. So I wanted to make sure that I was keeping things similar but different, and that I wasn't repeating myself too much. So, do I continuously write new classes? I try to keep things. I try to keep things a little updated. However, I love a return to life mat. I will do return to life forever and ever and ever and ever. Do I need to write that down? No, I know the order. And same with my intermediate reformer. I love that. I could do that over and over and over. But let's say, like yesterday, I had a client who I've only trained twice. And after I gave her her lesson, I wrote down what I taught her. So everybody's going to be different with how they could lesson plan. It very much could be something that they do beforehand. Let's say it's a class that I want to teach, and I have an idea of the exercises that I want to do, and I write it down, and I almost use that as a framework for me to remember. It could be something as simple as, doing my rolling like a ball, but instead of grabbing the ankles, I cross my arms. It could be something very similar or very basic, but just that little difference in details that I just want to note down. So I remember to do that. So I'll write maybe a class flow beforehand, and I use that as a framework. It doesn't mean that I'm going to stick to that exact flow every single time. But then for my clients, that's my dog. For my clients, I could very much just write down after the fact everything that we did, so that I can look back in my planner to see this was my client on this date, and this was her second lesson. And the focus was yesterday, again, it was my first time or my second time teaching her, was just mobilizing her spine, getting her spine to move. So I wrote down the exercises that we did, and I specifically annotated, these are the things that she needs help with. These are the things that she needs her to do for her homework. And yeah, so that was how I used it yesterday, was very much just I wrote everything down after the fact and I kept it simple.
Yeah, awesome. I think there's a saying something along the lines like what gets tracked gets improved, right? So
Absolutely.
we
Yeah.
that seems like something that you're definitely doing because you can see, and then a lot of times, especially like clients like us as well, and the clients, like they don't sometimes feel like the difference or see the improvement because it's
Sure.
like, and then you have to remind them, oh, 2 months
Yeah,
ago, this is what you could do, and here's what you can
absolutely.
do now, and here's what, like maybe the trouble you're having or anything like that.
I don't know if you've found this, but I have found and this is specific to instructors, so teaching other instructors. I can't say for just, my everyday client who's just coming for me to work them out in essence. But for other instructors, they really appreciate when I say, you should keep practicing this move. This is really going to help you with this. So I feel, and this is me personally too, I really appreciate when another instructor gives me homework to do and says, you should keep doing this. This is going to help you. So part of my lesson planning or lesson planner has a little section called homework. So it's just that in itself, just giving somebody the homework to keep practicing.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's, if you don't mind, could you
Sure.
show us your lesson planner?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see this thing.
This is what it looks like.
Oh,
And it's very thick because I had intentions of, depending on the type of instructor you are. So this is how thick the front cover is. And this is how thick the back cover is. So
mhm.
that if you're going from studio to studio and you're taking this with you and you're taking it out all the time, I want it to be something that's like it can go with you everywhere. So this is what the template looks like. So hopefully you
Okay.
can see, but this is like an
So it's,
example
yeah,
of what I
date,
did.
client
Yep.
class, lesson number, focus on goals, and then we have apparatus, exercises, homework, assessment, and transitions tried. Awesome.
Yes, absolutely. So I made it in a landscape format because what I started noticing when I was writing down in just my traditional notebook was I would snake because I couldn't fit everything on one page. I would snake up and down the page. So I did it this way where it has a split line in the center.
Mhm.
So depending on how you like to write, you can write linearly if you would like, or you can do what I did, which was going up and down. So because there's an apparatus section, you can specify what apparatus you're using. But let's say you're just doing reformer, you can just write reformer. And for me, what I would do is I would snake it then that way. But if I'm going to be using multiple pieces of equipment, I would write like, let's say I would do reformer, tower, and mat. I would do like that. So I would write like that, and then I would pause, put in my new piece of apparatus, do that same thing, and then so on and so forth. But each page is double-sided. So it's the same front to back. So if your class or your lesson takes up more space, you can just flip the page over and, keep going. And then it tears out. Each page is perforated, so you could tear it out. So if you do work at a studio and you do share clients with somebody else and you want to be able to refer to client notes as you're sharing a client, you could create client files and then tear this out and put it in each client's file. If you're that detailed, some people, maybe they're not that detailed, but I do know like that very much was a thing at a lot of studios. And that was why I created this. My actual inspiration for this was me selfishly because I use it, but then also, it's not something I asked people. It's not like I asked them, hey, do you write out your lesson plans? I just did it. But then I saw Blossom Crawford
Mhm.
talking about Kathy Grant and how Kathy Grant would write down absolutely every single class. And she had notebooks and binders of old classes. And she would write down literally all of these things. And in my mind, I was like, why hasn't anybody created something for this? If this is like Kathy Grant was doing this, my God, that was like a Pilates pioneer. So I just felt comfort in knowing that one of the foremost experts in Pilates did this. So that was really my, I guess, push to actually make something.
Awesome. And how many pages are in each one of your journals?
125.
Nice.
125 front to back. So I've had some people who buy one just for themselves. So for their own self practice, they use one. And then for their classes, they have one just for their classes. And then they have one just for their clients. So you can really, I wanted it to be custom, but then also customizable to each individual instructor, however they want to use it. If they want to combine, classes and clients in one, or if they want to keep it separated. It's really cool when people send me pictures of how they use it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so something else that I was thinking when you were talking about all of this is that especially like for studio owners or maybe teachers who are planning to, I don't know, maybe start their own online platform or anything like that, there would be some, and because I get some of those questions like, oh, what should I just start with? Like if you have all those lessons already written out, your job is like 60% done. The hardest part is already, all you do is just, okay, let me record this. Or if you're training multiple instructors, because I know staffing and creating a team is a big problem for a lot of studio owners. If you have those lesson plans that you want all of your teachers following a specific plan, it's already there, whether it's teacher training, whether it's setting up a certain standard at your studio, it's there. And you don't have to put any extra work in it.
I absolutely agree. And one of my peers, she owns her own studio and she does a teacher training program once a year. And she bought these for all of her apprentices because when I first brought it to the studio one day to show her, she was like, this is literally exactly what I want them to use because I make all of my apprentices write down their class flows beforehand. And then I look at it and approve it before they can teach it. And me, I'm just one person working in my own private space. So I'm not, everybody has like different ways that they want to, let's say, like have checks and balances. And so when she has her apprentices teach, it makes perfect sense to have it systemized, I guess you could say, in one way. And they get used to writing their class flows down and what she's looking for. And I just loved it. I was like, that is so cool. And like, how nice to have somebody who's going to help guide you on that, because that was another thing I found was a lot of instructors coming out of teacher training don't necessarily know how to teach classes because they didn't have that. Teacher training is so great at teaching us the exercises, hopefully, and how to do them and how to safely teach them in an individualized setting, but teaching in a group manner is different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But
yeah, and also like for beginner teachers, and I worked with some as well, is that one of the challenges, like they would want to stuff so many exercises in their lesson, and then they get like this deer in headlights because they are 40 minutes into it and they're not even halfway through, and it's like, what do I do? How do I finish? I didn't fit it in. And it like, frustrates them, obviously. And having that plan and knowing, okay, this is how many exercises I can actually get through normally.
Exactly.
And
and it can seem, just doing, that was legitimately the conversation I had with my client yesterday. We did a basic reformer, finished with a basic mat. And it doesn't seem like it's a lot of exercises, but for some people, man, that's a full workout and that's going to take up 50 minutes, if not an hour of your time. So I couldn't agree with that sentiment more. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of summarize, like, what do you think are the biggest benefits for you and maybe from some of the other peers that you talk to of lesson planning? What does it kind of really help with?
I mean, it's a lot of things. I think I used to dream in Pilates. You hear about servers and how servers have like nightmares, like serving nightmares of like forgetting to bring the extra soda to the table or whatever. I would have Pilates nightmares. I would have dreams and I would have nightmares. where it would be like, oh my God, I completely forgot to do the left side. Or like you said, like you run out of time and you're like, ah. So I think writing down your lesson plans, is it something you're going to do forever? Probably not. Some people maybe. But as you're beginning and you're new, I think just like we said, writing is something, it just triggers something different in our brain. It makes us remember things more. So even if you're writing down the same order, let's say, you know your stomach series, your series of 5, but maybe that just means you write down each individual exercise so you remember them, because it happens where you're teaching something and then all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, what was I just doing? Where was I going with this? And writing it down helps with that. So there's that, just remembering exercises, remembering orders. We all think we may know the order, and maybe while we're doing it ourselves and putting ourselves through the workout, we remember it more, just muscle memory. But when you're teaching it, sometimes you're like, why did I just do that? That doesn't make sense. That's not what we should be doing right now. So it's that accountability aspect. I also think it's just really wonderful to be able to look back on your body of work. So meaning you can fill up a journal and you're like, man, I taught all those classes, or wow, I've taught all these lessons. That's really cool. So that in itself is something to me, everybody wants to get from A to Z right away, but going from A, B, C, D, that there, you can't like fast forward through that. You have to go through the steps. And again, I like seeing the progression of my teaching and seeing how I've evolved as an instructor. It's cool to look back on when I first started and the things that I thought were important and the details that I would write down where it's like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, but comes with time.
Yeah. So do you, like, when you create those lesson plans, do you usually follow the same like structure, I guess, like framework for all of them, or
Sure.
it kind of goes
Yeah,
wherever
that's
it goes?
a great question. And this is me personally, I really am a fan of the orders. Truly, I love them. I love Return to Life. I love the basic reformer order. I love the intermediate order. How I've changed over the years, when I first started writing out all my lesson plans, I would kind of just go a little rogue, and maybe I would start with a plank. Okay, let's say that. I maybe would start my class right away with a plank because I thought that was cool. And, it's getting people into their body and stabilizing. I don't do that now. I followed in how you were saying, a framework. Yes, maybe I'll change a few details, and kind of how we were talking earlier, maybe the breathing is a little different, or maybe the placement of the arms is a little different, or the orientation of the legs on the mat, maybe that'll be a little different. But for the most part, I keep it pretty. I'm a big fan of basics. I love the foundational basic movements. So I give a lot of love to foundational basic movements. I truly believe you cannot advance your practice unless you get those foundational movements instilled in your body. You feel them without having to do the movement itself. So I stick to a very similar framework each time, but sometimes it's a little different. But for the most part, it's like, I'll give an example. Let's say I'm doing like a mat class, in Return to Life. All that we do is the front and back with a side lying leg series. We just do front and back with the leg. But I like a long side lying leg series. So I'll add a little joie de vivre to it to just make it a little bit more spicy, a little more interesting. So I'll go rogue in that sense. But for the most part, I love the orders. I think the orders exist for a reason, and I very much lean into the orders. However, let's say I'm teaching a tower class. Tower, there's so many ways you can just be efficient with a spring. And same with the wounded chair. There's so many ways you can be efficient with a spring selection. So I really like to maximize my setup. So whatever my setup is, I try to do at least 3 exercises with that setup. So, to to eliminate, the up and down or changing a spring and just the class flow.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think, some of those, especially like the wounded chair, like this individual apparatus tower, there's not necessarily always a specific like order like we have on the reformer and mat that's strict. And, sometimes you take a class and all it does is like change this spring, change
Yes.
that. And, I understand like a lot of times with the especially beginner teachers, it can be a challenge to figure out exactly how to place that. But yeah, I think the more you can use the same setup for a number of exercises, and that takes planning because you can't just wing
Yeah.
it a lot of
Yes.
times unless you taught the same sequence multiple times
Yes.
and you just know it. Like you just have to prepare it in your head other than switching back and forth all
I'll
the time.
tell you, one of my very first classes I ever taught, I thought it was a great idea because I loved the exercise and I could get into it. I tried to teach semicircle to 10 people and it was an absolute dumpster fire. And it was just one of those things where I'm like, I'm never going to make this mistake again. I'm just not going to do this. It was like literally trying to wrangle cats. And yeah, I realized right then and there, it's like, you got to keep it a little bit more simple than that.
Yeah, classes and yeah, some of those advanced moves is like, whew.
Yeah. And what seems basic to us is
Mhm.
very advanced to a lot of people. So yeah, I've definitely evolved as an instructor. Really.
Well, I see, and that's why you need the journal to remember
Yes,
all of those things,
exactly.
because after
Exactly.
so many years, certain things you start forgetting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, how long ago have you launched? Like, when did you create your product? When did you
Yeah.
launch?
So I started tinkering with this idea probably in, I would say, November. And then when did I actually start making it? I contacted a designer in January. And then the back and forth with that and just doing my research, because it was like, all right, I have this idea. And are you familiar with Canva?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for anybody else who doesn't know what Canva is just like basically virtual scrapbooking. And it allows you to drag and drop a lot of things to make it a lot easier to create, let's say, graphics or artistic things or anything, YouTube thumbnails. So I put together what I thought was a skeleton, an outline. And then I have a gal who I used to work with who's a graphic designer. And I was like, okay, I want you to make this 10 times better. And that was what she did. And then she first delivered it as a PDF. And so I used it myself. I printed it out. And then so in the very beginning, how you were asking me about social media or before this, I just kind of put it out there to my Instagram, just as a poll on one of my stories, who writes their lesson plans? And then it was like, me, not me. And the amount of people who said me, I think 1,000 people responded to it saying they did. And I just was like, wow, okay, this is crazy. Because it's not that people don't talk about it, but it's just not like, you'll hear people saying, I'm lesson planning for the week or whatever, but nobody's showing their notebooks of lesson plans. So I was like, okay, wow, I think I actually have an idea. And I feel like this could be something that's really valuable. And then I leaned into asking my audience, like, would it be helpful if you had a dedicated space to write down the apparatus that you used? Yes, no. And they said yes. And so I just kind of kept dropping little breadcrumbs. It wasn't all at once that I asked these things, just like bombarding people with questions, but it would be me showing an order that I had written and then asking a question, just seeking feedback and letting it literally just progress as a natural evolution of what it is today. But I really would ask my audience, because when I first started using Instagram, I had no idea who was following me. I didn't know, are these just looky-loos? Are these people who actually do Pilates? Are these instructors. And so I learned after just truly asking, who are you? People would say, I'm a new instructor or I'm going through my teacher training. I think a lot of my videos err on the side of educational content, and really here are things you can do today type content. So I've garnered more, I would say, younger instructors who pay attention to what it is that I'm saying. And I was listening to their feedback, and it was really, if I had to create my, let's say, avatar of my person who's buying the lesson planner, it is somebody who is new to Pilates, new to teaching, is going through their teacher training program right now, or is perhaps transitioning from a contemporary background or just a mat only background to then more of a comprehensive teaching style. So that's who this is for. This is for that individual who is really immersing themselves in ideally the classical Pilates world, because I would love more people to teach authentic Pilates. And yeah, so that's how this came to be. Ah, did I lose you? Is anybody else frozen?
Just making sure we can get back to the YouTube live
Sure.
stream. Just making sure we can get back to the YouTube live stream. Just making sure we can get back to the YouTube live stream. All right, so let's get back to it.
Okay.
Now we're talking about all the different people who are buying and who can really benefit from it. And I think really one thing that stood out to me, and I see that a lot of people, they make the mistake of not doing this step, is that you actually qualified your idea before you put in the work and the investment to design it and everything else. So I think this is a super important step, is just really qualifying, making sure that you have the audience to market it to, and that your audience is actually interested in what you're trying to bring to the world. Because it's just one thing for us, just like, oh, it's a great idea, but it might be a great idea for you, but if nobody else is interested or thinking the same way, then there's just not enough market for it.
I would say too, I knew that I've never done anything like this. So I decided in the very beginning, I was like, if anything, this is just something I will use. So I first started as just a digital download, and I thought, okay, my investment, maybe it would be $300 total for the time and the labor of hiring a designer to help me with this. Okay, so if anything, it's $300. And then I put it out there for people to buy as a digital download, and people bought it as a digital download. So I was like, great, okay. And then I did my research on a manufacturer for an actual physical journal, and understanding just those little nuances of, the thickness of a paper, the color of a paper, the weight of the cover and the back, like that all makes a difference. The color of the spirals, things like that. I started paying attention to how expensive it would be. So when I first did these, I did a small order just because I wanted to, see would people actually buy this. And I learned right away, wow, when you order things in small quantities, it's a lot more expensive. So I then was like, all right, how many people are interested in this? And so I placed an order, I think, for 200. And okay, people were interested in that. So I would say I really did this with the most care, in the sense of I'm not starting a clothing company and I'm not, manufacturing goods. I'm literally printing a planner. So I wasn't going crazy all in. And that's not to say that doesn't work. But for me, somebody who's never sold anything, God, the biggest thing that I was nervous about was like, how do I charge tax for different states? How do I charge tax for different counties? Like, I just really was like, okay, figure out one thing at a time. Literally get it set up on your website. Cool. You got it on your website. Now maybe try Etsy. Okay, cool. Then tackle Amazon. And you just got to give yourself grace of trying to do something like this. But I will say a digital product or something as simple as a planner in terms of shipping is really probably one of the easiest things you could start with, because it's flat. It doesn't require an intense amount of packaging. So I was very thoughtful in that sense. Like there's plenty of other things I was looking to potentially create, and it just was like, yeah, that's going to take way too much time.
And did you do any type of pre-orders before you actually launched it or not? Or you just waited until you got them?
Question. So if I went back and redid launching a product, I would 1000% do pre-orders, because then you really understand how many people want to buy it. And a pre-order simply just means they pay you in knowing that you're going to send this item once you get it. I would have done pre-orders. However, I didn't. So, and it's worked out fine. It has worked out fine for me, but I feel like that's even something more to give you as an entrepreneur or business owner just a little more confidence in knowing that you're not going to be, I don't want to say wasting any money, because everything's a learning experience, but like you're not going to be wasting any money. So I didn't do pre-orders, but I would for my next product.
Awesome. And now you also have some other products as well. Now you have the sticky notes, right? That's for your second
I do.
one.
Yeah. I have that. You want me to grab them? I'll show you.
Yeah.
Okay, let me go grab one. So I did the sticky notes at the same time. So they're like that. So they have the date, the class, the focus, and then same thing, apparatus and exercise. And the reason I did this is because I would take my planner with me to the studio, and I would just have it sitting on a desk open to reference as I was teaching. And I then would tear it out and sometimes literally get a piece of tape and tape it to the wall. And I was like, okay, just make a freaking sticky already. So that was what I did. And I did these as just another way to give you peace of mind when you're teaching. If you truly feel like you're about to forget something, just go look at your sticky note and just double check, make sure you're not forgetting anything. So I did these at the same time that I made the lesson planner, because it was just a really simple thing for my graphic designer who was helping me with this to make. And they've been a hit. People love these. And I would say a lot of studio owners, I think it's really sweet and thoughtful I've had multiple studio owners like buy 10 of them at a time because they just hand them out to all of their instructors. And I think, God, that's so nice. So yeah, I've got that. I'm working on, it's just a prototype right now, but this is a bookmark. And I found a guy, I love the internet. I love Instagram because I found him on Instagram and he's a 3D printer. And so I told him what I was looking for. It's a clip-in bookmark. So it's super easy to take in and out, and it only is 4 clips on top and 4 clips on bottom. But what it eventually is going to be is, I'm going to change it a little bit, but it's going to be a sleeve. So it'll be a bookmark for this, but it's going to be a sleeve. And then I'm going to create pre-populated class flows or orders that people can slide into that bookmark so that when they are writing their lesson plans, they have their little bookmark to reference for commonly done exercises, let's say. So as they're writing their classes out, they can be like, oh, I could do shoulder roll down, or this would be a good place to throw in my saw, whatever. So that's what I'm working on next. And I'm almost done with my lesson planning guide. So I was gobbling up what you were saying earlier because I'm talking about that in my guide, where it's basically like, you just finished your teacher training. Now what? Kind of like, okay, you're going to have to actually like teach, and how do we do that? So it's going to have things like what you were talking about, you think you want to do 60 exercises. Well, guess what? You're going to do 20 because that's really all you're going to have time for. So it is more teaching, or I don't even want to say teaching, but just reinforcing this idea that sometimes less is more when we're talking and teaching. Like, pay attention to the words that you use. Are you being way too wordy and somebody is not able to interpret all of that information? Are we focusing on one thing, or are we trying to do 10 things at once? So it's very much geared again towards that individual that is maybe currently in teacher training, or is right out of teacher training, or is looking to transition from one style of Pilates to another. And it basically is just a coalition of everything that I've learned simplified. And this is like let's say the little black dress of Pilates, of like, these are the things you always need and you really don't need much more. But then I go over how to write effective lesson plans. So when you're actually writing your classes, how should you write them? How should you structure it? How many repetitions should you do? How to give muscles a break in between. If you've done a ton of abs, like maybe give the abs a little bit of in the hip flexors a second to relax after that. So it's going to go over a bunch of stuff, but I'm really, really, really excited about it. And I've been filming a ton of videos because, part of Pilates is realizing like what one person knows as one exercise is a different exercise for somebody else. So coming up with a video for each movement to just break it down. Like, how do you do, let's say you're rolling in and out on the tower. So what does that look like? How do we get into this? What's the setup? Why do we do this exercise? And so that when they're writing their lesson plans, and I give that as a suggested exercise, perhaps they can just click on that link and it takes them to a quick video showing them exactly what rolling in and out looks like. So we're all on the same page as we're going through the guide. There's no questions as to what is this exercise. They can just click on that link, see what it is. And, oh, by the way, maybe you can throw that in here. So it's a guide on how to write lessons, how to teach Pilates with a bit more impact, let's say, and to make your teaching in your classes and your lessons just elevated, how to elevate your classes. So I'm very excited about it. I've put a ton of work into it, and it really is at this point going to be my little child I birthed to the Pilates community.
Do you have like any like suggested ETA for the launch?
Yes. Okay. So I have about 10 or so exercises left to film. And then the same gal who helped me. So I used to be a content marketer in my like other real life, I would say, like my non-Pilates life. And so I would say like a lot of what I'm doing is, I would say, comes from that. So I'm looking at it like very 360-ish, but I used to work with this gal who is a graphic designer. So that's who I was like, immediately, I was like, oh, I need to work with Megan. And so she's going to put this together as a beautiful PDF, like a really lovely PDF. That's, I think, going to be something that's referenced a lot. So right now it's about 30 pages. I'm getting the rest of my exercises filmed and put into the guide correctly. And then she's going to turn it into a beautiful, just a wonderful resource. So I'm hoping, today is June 20th. I'm hoping by the first week of July, it'll be done.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
it's really close.
So it's
Yay.
close. Yeah. I'm pushing for the beginning of July, but I don't want to say a perfectionist, but yeah, it's just scary to put something out there. I want it to like be the best it can be. So I don't want to rush it because there's no timeline anybody else is holding my feet to. It's just me. So yeah, so hopefully that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks. And I just have this idea of everything being, like a little bundle. You have your lesson planning guide, you have your lesson planner, you have your sticky notes, you have your bookmark, and you just feel prepared. That is like truly what I want people to feel, is empowered to teach great, meaningful Pilates. I think in the world of Instagram and online, Pilates has become almost like the word natural, where it's like, what does that mean? Like it's so, I don't know, like subjective to each person. And all I know is I can put out what I think of as Pilates, and I want to perpetuate that. And so this is my way of contributing to this beautiful method that I hope people continue to learn about and are able to embrace the authentic essence of what I think of as Pilates and what I hope a lot of other people think of as Pilates.
Awesome. We've actually had like a couple of people comment and they said like they were really appreciating all the information that you're sharing and interested in these types of products over there. So that's already validation. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I know that, well, let me ask you that. With your actual print versions, do you ship them only within the US, or since you're using Etsy and Amazon, can you ship?
So Etsy, I ship to every single country you could potentially want. And my Etsy, the name of my website is boapilates.com. What that stands for is body of work of art. So I think of the body as literally a body of work, but I also think of it as a work of art, because it really is. And I never felt artistic until I did Pilates, and I thought, wow, I am the artist. My body is the canvas. I can sculpt my body however I want. And I don't know. That's literally how I think about it. So my Etsy is body of work, and that's my page, is body of work. And there you can buy my lesson planner, my sticky notes. You can you can buy the digital download, and I ship to every single country. On my website, I ship to the US, and then the EU is tricky to standardize shipping. So I'm trying to remember all the countries that I ship to on my website. But when people one-off email me or send me a DM, I just tell them, like, send me your zip code and I'll give you a quote, because I just look it up in my shipping account, like how much it will cost for me to ship it to you. And so I've done that a handful of times, probably 5 to 10 times, just one-off sending to people, just because, let's say, like sending it to um, like England, let's say it's $20 for some reason to send it to Ireland. It's like 35. So I don't want to charge other people $35 for shipping. So like we were talking about in the very beginning, it's like one step at a time. I'm just figuring out one thing at a time.
And you
So
sell on Amazon as well, right?
I do sell it on Amazon as well. Yes. I know.
Awesome.
I'm trying to be ubiquitous, just
Everywhere.
wherever.
So while we're talking, I was just putting the links to your Etsy, Amazon, and website
Oh, that's so
into the
sweet of you.
chat,
Thank you.
and I
Thank
will include them as well. So yeah,
Okay. Thank you. That's
so
very
they
kind.
can follow up and order and all that. And your digital downloads are also available worldwide, right?
Yes.
Like for
Yes, yes,
that,
yes.
obviously there's no shipping restriction
Yeah,
or
yeah,
anything.
that's all available on my website on Etsy. You can get that through my Instagram as well in my store there. Yeah, but there's just, there's something different about an actual physical notebook. But
I
I've had
agree.
plenty of people when I first launched it, because the first, I would say month, I only had the digital download, and God, the response of that was so overwhelming. It was so cool to see just people all over the world. Like truly, it was magical. And people would print it out and print out, 50 plus pages and just take it to their local, like whatever FedEx would be in their country, and get it bound, like get it
Mhm.
spiralized, which I thought was really cool. So where there's a will, there's a way.
That's true. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was really incredible interview. Enjoyed learning about your ideas about lesson planning, about creating
Yeah.
products, launching them, and just really following your passion with different things and then venturing out into something new, right? Like it can be a scary journey, like you were saying,
Super
because you
scary.
don't know what you're stepping into a lot of times.
Yeah.
So to finish up our interview here, again, like I'm gonna add all the links to your Instagram, website, Etsy, Amazon. So any way that if you guys are interested in following Alana or getting in here for products, that would be the best way to do that. So yeah, make sure to get her journal and sticky notes and all her products, but also like for all the people who are maybe considering toying with the idea of launching some of their something
Yeah.
that they're passionate about. What would be your advice for them, just from your journey?
I would say, first of all, is it something that you want? If it's something that you want, chances are somebody else would want it. So I like fishing. Am I going to create a fishing pole? No, because I don't fish a lot. Like I don't know the ins and outs of that. But do I like Pilates? Do I do Pilates? Do I like write lessons? Yes. So it's something that I am familiar with. And I feel that that is probably the number one thing, is the authenticity behind whatever it is that you are going to do, down to like the color of the font, the font itself. Like I'll show you. I wanted the front to look like this because on the Return to Life cover, it's a beautiful cursive. And I wanted it to just, right when you look at it, it gives you that feeling of the essence of Pilates. So I feel like it's those little details that you and you alone are going to be thinking about when you create your product. So it's specific to you, it's specific to what makes you excited. Like, yeah, so start there. Just you have an idea, and if you kind of can't stop thinking about it, then look into it. Like I just looked into, where do I make a planner? Like where do I get that? Where do I acquire that? And then I would say when you start emailing people, that's when it becomes real. Like when I emailed the manufacturer for the journals, I was like, oh, okay, this is what I do. Okay, I could do that. So I think it's like, try not to do everything all at once. Just do your research one step at a time. If you can financially afford to do it and it doesn't freak you out, cool. That's like another little checkbox. Like, okay, I could do this. So I leaned into what I already knew was I write lessons. Then I asked other people, do you write lessons? Yep, you do. Okay, cool. I had somebody who I knew was a graphic designer. If I didn't know somebody who was a graphic designer, I leverage Instagram for everything. I treat it almost like Google anymore, where in the search bar, I just search whatever it is I'm looking for and then see what pops up. And it's really cool to connect with other people who do something you don't do. So, for example, like my bookmark, I'm not a 3D printer. I have no idea how to 3D print, but I just reached out to the guy and I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about making. I showed him an image and I was like, is this something you think you could help me with? And he's just a guy in North Carolina, like has his own shop. And he was like, yeah, I could help you with that. And it's like, once you start putting it out there and talking to people, and that's going to get you excited. And I would say that's the number one thing. Is it something that's going to excite you? If it's going to stress you out, maybe it's not worth it. But like, man, the first time I had this in my hands and I looked at it and I was like, I made that. That is so cool. I made that. And other people are buying this. They like this. They want this. It was just a wonderful feeling. So one step at a time. Is it something you're interested in? Cool. Are other people interested in it? Cool. Can you make this and it's not going to freak you out, stress you out? Cool. And then just keep going, keep going.
I know. I think like
Around
one
the
thing
world.
also you mentioned, and this is something you're already big on Instagram, you've been using it for years and you have that experience in content marketing, creating content, which is super important. But again, having the audience to sell it to or to
Yeah.
connect with is also super important because again, this is one of those mistakes that I've seen some of people that did consultancy work for making, or that there's like, oh, I'll just create it and then I'll start to market it.
Yeah.
You can't,
Yeah.
unless you have a huge budget, right? Just to kind of
Yeah.
advertise the snot out of it. You just have to have somebody to market to. You need to know your people because that's also going to help you with qualifying that idea and testing it out and figuring out. If you don't know, if you don't have any audience, any tribe that follows you, then it's like you can't, it's just a thought in your head that's
Yeah.
really quite
Yeah.
hard to justify.
Yeah. And I would say, there's a million notebooks people could buy, but there really weren't any Pilates lesson planners. So it's not to say that you have to create something that completely doesn't exist, but, create something that's unique to you and that's authentic to you. And I would say something I've learned with Instagram that's really cool is people just like want to they want to be represented, let's say. So, there's so much on Instagram about like teacher training or training to athletes or training to dancers and these people who are so advanced in their practice. But like for the everyday person who's just practicing Pilates, people want to see that person represented too. They want to see the inflexible guy. They want to see bigger bodied people doing Pilates. They want to see older people doing Pilates. So I feel like this journal isn't geared towards one specific type of practitioner. It's geared for anybody. And yeah, that's I would say something that I've like really enjoyed understanding is just my audience and who they are and what they're struggling with. And that was how the guide came to be, was because people would ask me, I'm almost done with my training, but yada, 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 XYZ, what do I do? And that's when I was just like, all right, this is becoming a consistent theme of people asking me questions. I'm not, everything I say isn't absolute, but here is what I would do in that situation. So that's really what my guide is more of just like, here are some things that you should consider. This is just going to make your life a little easier. And that kind of comes down a lot of the time to lesson planning in terms of like keeping your class flow efficient, keeping your spring choice efficient, how you can teach to one person individually, but in a group setting to make it so that that one person doesn't feel singled out and it applies to everybody in the class. So how can you give that individualized experience amongst 5 to 10 to 15 people, and just kind of navigating teaching with a bit more ease. So yeah, that was a lot.
Thank you so much, Alana. Like, really enjoyed it. Again, all the links below. Make sure to follow Alana for all her teaching tips, especially if you're a new instructor, a beginner. She has wonderful videos on her Instagram. Loved watching her reels and everything. Just also so inspirational. And definitely get one of her products because I really think it's a great addition. A great tool in your teaching toolbox, regardless of whether you're new to teaching or if you've been doing it for a while. And I mean, I personally love journals. Any type of journal is a great journal. So
Yes.
like I'm almost like to collect them sometimes. So if you're one of those people and like your checklist and everything, that's the perfect thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. This was, it's fun just talking like I kind of didn't even really put it together. Like probably the reason I created this was because watching my dad write down all of his training programs back in the day at the gym. Like I really didn't even think about that, but like it's all part of my experience. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that I would have done something like this because I was exposed to writing down my workouts from such a young age.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're so welcome. It was wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much.